You're sitting around a fire. It's 50,000 BC. The sun just dropped behind the ridge and there is nothing to do. No screen, no schedule, no obligation of any kind. Just darkness, warmth, and the people next to you. And at some point, one of your ancestors picked up a piece of bone, put it to their lips, and blew. What came out wasn't noise, it was music. Here's what almost nobody talks about when it comes to ancient humans. They weren't just surviving, they were playing. They were gambling, singing, competing, and telling stories around fires for tens of thousands of years before anyone built a city or planted a crop. And the evidence for this is genuinely wild. Because the further back archaeologists dig, the more they keep finding the same thing, that the urge to have fun is not a modern luxury. It might be the oldest thing about us. So, this video is about what ancient humans actually did for fun. We're going to go through the music, the games, the sports, and the storytelling. And by the end of this, you're going to see something that most history classes completely miss. The real story doesn't start with civilization. It starts way, way before that. And there's one detail about how games began that almost nobody gets right. We'll get there. Let's start with music, because this is where things get immediately strange. The Neanderthal flute, found in the cave of Divje in Slovenia, is thought to date back at least 50,000 years, making it the oldest known musical instrument in the world. And here's the part that stops most people cold. It has been suggested that it was made by Neanderthals, not modern humans. The date is significant because it predates the arrival of modern humans in Europe by several thousand years. So the first known musician on this planet wasn't even our species. Now there is genuine scientific debate about this. While some scholars argue the holes could be bite marks from carnivores, others present evidence of tool marks and intentional hole spacing as signs of human craftsmanship. But the National Museum of Slovenia has concluded that the evidence has finally refuted the claims that the bone was perforated by an animal and that the role of Neanderthals in its creation is secure. And when researchers built replicas and actually played them, further musical experiments confirmed a surprisingly wide tonal range and the ability to perform varied and technically demanding music. Think about what that means. A Neanderthal sitting in a cave in what is now Slovenia carved holes into a bear's thigh bone with deliberate specific spacing because they wanted to make music, not to hunt, not to signal danger, to play, and they weren't alone in finding creative ways to make sound. About 18,000 years ago, the Magdalenian occupants of Marsulis Cave in what is now France transformed a shell of the predatory sea snail Caronia lampus into a wind instrument. The conch, bigger than a human head, was first unearthed in 1931 and sat inside a museum for decades. After sitting in a museum for decades, researchers took a fresh look and determined it had been modified thousands of years ago to become a wind instrument. They invited a French horn player to play it, producing a deep, plaintive sound like a foghorn from the distant past. Marsulis Cave is not located near an ocean, so the prehistoric people must have either moved around widely or used trading networks to obtain the shell. Someone traveled far or traded hard, specifically to get their hands on something they could play music with. So we have bone flutes, we have conch shells, and we have people going out of their way to acquire instruments. But here's the thing that most videos on this topic completely skip over, and it's the detail I want you to hold on to, because we're going to come back to it at the end. The oldest instrument we've found is already sophisticated, already deliberate, already musical, which means whatever came before it, the singing, the rhythm, the humming around the fire, is even older and almost entirely invisible to archaeology. The music we can prove is just the surface. Now, let's talk about games, because this is where the story gets even more interesting. Archaeologists found a set of gaming tokens in a grave at Başarhöyük in southeast Turkey dating back to at least 3000 BC, making them the earliest gaming pieces ever found and confirming that board games likely originated and spread from the Fertile Crescent regions in Egypt more than 5,000 years ago. The small sculpted gaming tokens consist of 49 stones carved into different shapes and painted in green, red, blue, black, and white. Some depict pigs, dogs, and pyramids. Others feature round and bullet shapes. Dice were also found, as well as 3 circular tokens made of white shell topped with a black round stone. But here's what makes this find genuinely strange. These weren't found in a home or a marketplace or a game hall. They were found in a grave. The gaming pieces, thousands of beads, hundreds of complete pots, and metal artifacts indicate those graves were not ordinary burials but most probably belonged to individuals of a ruling class. Someone important enough to be buried with wealth took their game pieces with them. Which tells you something about how much games meant. They weren't just a way to kill time. They were a marker of status, of identity, maybe even of what you hoped to keep doing after you died. That idea shows up again with ancient Egypt. The world's oldest gaming board, called Senet, was found in pre-dynastic and First Dynasty burials in Egypt, dating back to 3500 and 3100 BC, respectively. The game is also depicted in paintings in a number of ancient tombs. Because of the element of luck in the game and the Egyptian belief in determinism, it was believed that a successful player was under the protection of the major gods. Consequently, Senet boards were often placed in the grave alongside other useful objects for the dangerous journey through the afterlife. Fun and the fear of death completely tangled together. You weren't just playing a board game, you were rehearsing something cosmic. And here's where the story of games takes a turn that almost nobody expects. We tend to assume that organized games came with civilization, that you needed cities, agriculture, and settled life before people started competing with each other in structured ways. But the archaeological record keeps pushing that assumption earlier and earlier. Evidence from Mesoamerica suggests that forager societies, people who had no agriculture at all, appear to have built dedicated gaming spaces thousands of years before farming arrived in the region. Games didn't wait for civilization, they came with the humans. Which brings us to the question nobody fully answers: why? Why did ancient people who were spending enormous energy just staying alive also dedicate time and effort to playing? Part of the answer is probably social. Games create stakes. They create winners and losers, alliances and rivalries, something to talk about afterward. And storytelling works the same way. Every culture that has ever existed has had stories, not just as entertainment, but as the operating system for how the group understood the world. The Mesoamerican ball game is one of the clearest examples of this. Dating back to around 1400 BCE, it's the earliest confirmed organized team ball sport we know of. And it wasn't purely recreational. Recorded oral myths and archaeological evidence show the game tied directly into religious ideology. It dramatized sacred legends, with the players essentially performing a myth in real time. Ancient sports entertainment and sacred storytelling were the same thing. The game was the story, and the story was the game. That's a level of cultural sophistication that tends to surprise people. We picture ancient humans as mostly concerned with food and shelter, but the evidence keeps showing something different. People who thought carefully about meaning, who used play to explore ideas about gods and death and luck and fate. And if you want to know just how deep the roots of leisure go, here's the detail I promised you at the start. Anthropologists and ethnomusicologists assert that there is no society without song, and more specifically, there is no ritual or celebration without accompanying sound. The production of sounds in social contexts is very ancient. The Divji Babe flute, which may be 60,000 years old, is already a finished, functional instrument. It didn't appear out of nowhere. Before anyone carved it, people were already singing, already clapping rhythms, already using their voices and bodies to make music together. As far as we know, Neanderthals were the first among the closest human relatives to make musical instruments. The flute from Divji Babe testifies to the fact that Neanderthals were capable of such an abstract and uniquely human activity as creating music. But what that really means is this: the impulse to make music, to play games, to tell stories, to compete, it predates our species. It predates civilization by tens of thousands of years. It may be one of the most fundamental things about what it means to be human, or even close to human. The fun came first. Everything else was built around it. If this kind of deep history is your thing, there's a video right next to this one that goes even further back. into the oldest known art, the first symbolic thinking, and what it tells us about how the human brain actually evolved. It's genuinely one of the more mind-bending rabbit holes on this channel, and I think you'll want to watch it right after this. And if you've got a take on which of these ancient pastimes you think you'd have been best at, the music, the games, the storytelling, drop it in the comments. Genuinely curious. Subscribe if you want more of this because we go deep on this stuff every week, and the next one is already in the works.